As we all know, the coronavirus has had a huge effect on all of us, especially businesses and industries. One of the more severe effects on a particular industry is the film industry, with many freelancers working in it now jobless. Film productions halted, release dates for major releases cancelled or pushed further back, and many cinema chains facing the possibility of going out of business. The one bright spot for the film industry is the massive surge in streaming revenue being turned over, as everyone is getting their movie and TV fix from brands like Netflix, Amazon Prime, Now TV, etc. One of the more unprecedented decisions is to release new movies that were still screening in cinemas at the time before the lockdown and distribute them to streaming services. We know that movies aren't going anywhere. In fact, the demand is as high for them as ever. The same can be argued is not the case for cinemas themselves. To some, this pendulum swing of people gathering around a TV to watch the biggest releases, instead of sitting in rows at the cinema, is a long time coming, with only the homebound nature of the coronavirus pushing the inevitable. Which leads me to the question, how vital are cinemas to film? Movies and cinemas have had a long and mostly successful marriage throughout history. In fact, back in the first half of the 20th century, going to the movies was a formerly big social event, which called for dignified apparel. And while that amount of prestige has faded throughout time, going to the cinema all the way through the century was the only way to watch the latest releases in film. To me, there's a lot of positives that come from the cinematic experience versus the living room experience. The most obvious difference is the mere spectacle of the 45 to 65 feet wide screen which the film is shown on, and the immersive cinema surround sound. But there's an intangible companionship that bonds a room full of strangers, reacting to the same thing. There's been many movies that were elevated by the audience's reaction to it, which are mostly lost on a rewatch by yourself. Also, there is a sense of non-said commitment to watching a cinema release. You've made the effort to travel, get dressed, and arrive on time for the screening, which subconsciously provokes you to adhere more to whatever you're watching, opposed to the over-convenience of streaming, where if the film doesn't suck you in immediately, you can turn it off and watch something else. The cinema simply allows the film and the artist behind it more opportunity to win a person over because of the self-imposed obligation the audience member has accepted. Also, because of the agreed quota of being quiet and not looking at your phone to annoy fellow moviegoers, you also limit possible distractions which allow your sole focus to be on the movie, which invites a more engaged experience, which contrasts the often fallen into habit of having a film on in the background while you do other things, which can build a pattern of passive viewing. Many filmmakers, aficionados and fans say that because of all these reasons, cinemas are the best way to watch movies. But on the other hand, the expendability and convenience of streaming can and evidently has encouraged many people worldwide of staying at home, and the reasons are not to laugh at either. First, it's most often cheaper. There's no need to spend money on petrol, parking spots, overpriced food and tickets, which more often than not is a financially draining affair, which puts off the more casual audience from ever going to cinema unless it's the biggest of big releases like the Avengers or the Star Wars movies. Also, streaming provides the luxury of a more consumer-controlled experience. You can watch whatever movie whenever you want without a ticking clock. You can pause it, pick up where you left off the next day, rewatch it whenever you want, and you only have to pay a subscription fee. Now, most of this was also the case of VHSs and DVDs, which also put a dent on cinema chains' profits when they came out. The biggest difference now is Netflix productions and its creation of new films, in particularly made for streaming. For the last few years, big names and draws have transitioned from outputting their releases to Netflix, including David Fincher, the Coen brothers, and recently Martin Scorsese. Not only this, but many movies are now exclusive to Netflix, meaning unless you catch it on a very limited cinema screening, you can only watch these new titles on Netflix at home. Amazon Prime and other streaming services are doing the exact same thing, thus building exclusivity. To me, this is the biggest game changer to cinemas since the advent of television. Unlike DVDs where you had to wait for the film's run to end at the theatre to buy the DVD of it, now movies drop directly to Netflix and now it's there forever. It's still a surreal experience for me to now expect the newest Scorsese film to be on TV now instead of having to travel outside to go see it at a cinema. But cinemas still get many movies that Netflix or any other streaming services don't. This includes the biggest box office franchises, thus being Marvel and Star Wars, and they still do huge business. And there's enough evidence that even with the alternatives, people in mass will still make the effort to go to the movies to see them. Also, with this lockdown taking place, one would imagine once the restrictions are lifted, surely people would have a more romantic and nostalgic longing for the cinema, as they've been forced to be cooped up and watch TV all this time, therefore actively wanting to go to the cinema more to revel in the more social and interactive atmosphere it provides. As they say, absence makes the heart grow fonder, and the idea might prevail of people cherishing the movie-going experience a lot more than they did before all this happened, therefore creating a vinyl revival-like surge in popularity. But nothing's certain. A year from now, this video is most likely going to be dated one way or the other with this assessment. But the question will still stand. Are cinemas vital to movies? Maybe not. Movies are still movies despite what platform and format you consume them. But I think there's something to be said about the X factor of a shared experience with 100 strangers, finding emotional common ground perpetrated by a huge illuminated screen in the dark that just can't be replicated in your living room. On current issues, Christopher Nolan's new movie Tenet is seemingly going to be Hollywood's welcome back big release for cinemas, as the film's director has been stubborn on not pushing the release date back and not dropping it on streaming services, as he's one of the industry's biggest advocates of the cinematic experience. We'll see if the release of the film's original July 17th date remains by the time people watch this video. But I know one thing, something tells me it deserves to be seen on the biggest screen possible, and there's only really one place to fulfill that.